I come from Orlando, Florida. That's where I grew up. And so to come to Utah on my mission, it was like a foreign country to me. A lot of people think that's funny that are from Utah just because this is home. Um, but the mountains were all new. I wasn't used to that. And I have to say the MTC was almost like paradise. Like my memory of the MTC was almost like everything was so peaceful and like there was just angels all around. As you know, the missionaries, just the spirit there was so powerful. And looking back, that was probably one of the most under-recognized highlights of my mission, was just being in MTC around all those missionaries all the time, learning the gospel, practicing teaching, and feeling the spirit so strong 24/7. It was awesome. I love the MTC. When we went to my mission field from the MTC, we just took a bus. You know, we didn't have to fly in an airplane or anything like that. We got to the mission office and I met my trainer that first day and we went tracting. So we went knocking doors and I was super nervous. I was like freaking out nervous and I didn't want to talk to anybody. And I remember he wanted me to knock on the door and introduce myself. And I was just like so scared I wouldn't do it. Like I was a little bit stubborn, and I think it made him a little bit frustrated with me because I was so scared. That first day was just scary, but after that, of course, it got better. But that was probably my most like prominent memory of when I first got to my mission, was just like super scared of everything. I had a good trainer. He tried really hard to push me out of my comfort zone, and I think that's kind of why I also hated him at the same time. But I respect him for it, you know. I think just talking to everybody when you're out on the street, not being afraid to just, oh, it's a random person walking, I'm just going to go talk to them. I don't know who they are, but I'll talk to them. That was the biggest surprise. I always thought it was just more of a, let's just teach lessons, let's knock doors and teach lessons. I didn't expect to just talk to anybody. And so that was probably the most big surprise for me. So I served my mission in Salt Lake City South from summer of 2006 to the summer of 2008. And at the time, there was about, I think, 180 missionaries in our mission. And the mission went from like the Kearns area, about 4,100 south, down to the point of the mountain, down by Draper. And then from the Oakers to the Wasatch Front. So just in that South Salt Lake area. Not a very big mission, geographically speaking. Each missionary companionship would cover 1 to 2 stakes. And that was also 1 to 2 square miles. So a very small area to be missionaries. And it was hard. Sometimes I was in areas for 4.5 months and I didn't even visit every single ward in my area in that entire time. Also, when I was there, we had a lot of Spanish-speaking missionaries. And we had 6 zones, English-speaking zones, and then overlapping those English-speaking zones, there were 2 Spanish-speaking zones. And so every English-speaking area also had a set of Spanish-speaking missionaries that covered a bigger area. So every now and then we'd run into them on the street. There was even a couple times where my area bordered the mission, and there was one time where we were knocking doors at the edge of our area, and I saw some missionaries that were from the other mission, and I was like, oh, that's weird, you know, like, they're so close but so far, you know what I mean? So that was kind of just interesting, the challenging aspects of having such a small area so close together. I think the mission's changed since then. I think they actually split the mission in half now since then, because we were baptizing between 150 to 180 baptisms per month in my mission, as a mission, completely. Our goal was to baptize weekly, and I came pretty close to that. We had about, I averaged about 2 baptisms a month, so pretty close to hitting the goal, which is always there to help you push, you know, and to do better than you would probably otherwise do. Goals are awesome. So serving your mission in Utah, there's obviously lots of members of the church already. And it's funny going door to door, half the people on the street will say, oh, everybody's members, everybody's members. There's nobody that I know of that's not a member of the church. And, you know, they'd be surprised how many non-members there actually are that don't know much about the church. So that's kind of unique to the Utah area. That's something else that kind of surprised me when I came to Utah, is that there's so many Mormon churches everywhere. Like you get up on a high hill and you can just see like chapels everywhere. And that's something I'd never seen before. that's kind of unique to Utah. In my mission, really almost everybody that I taught had heard about the church. Most of them had family members that were members of the church. They almost all knew the Joseph Smith story. So to teach the first lesson and preach about Joseph Smith receiving the first vision and the restoration of the gospel and priesthood authority was nothing new to them. So the biggest challenge was really getting them to live the gospel, just to get baptized, come to church, to get out and go to church, because most people had been to church growing up. There's a lot of part-member families that we taught, where the wife was a member and the husband wasn't, or vice versa, or maybe the husband and wife were both members but less active, and they had a 9-year-old that had never gotten baptized. And so we would teach that little kid about the gospel because they're technically old enough to be considered a convert. So we had a lot of part-member families that we taught. And, in those situations, it was all about reactivating the whole family, get mom and dad back to church because they had once had a testimony and maybe they lost it through the struggles of life. And so just getting them to go to church, be a part of the community, get a calling, that kind of stuff was the biggest challenge. So I served in Kearns, Taylorsville, Draper, South Jordan, West Jordan. Well, I was dating a girl for 2 years before my mission, and we were pretty serious, and she was going to wait for me and everything. After about 2 months into my mission, I got a Dear John from her. And that was a really tough experience for me. But, what I did at that point was I kneeled down and I prayed very sincerely. As soon as I got the letter, she was going to get married to somebody else. As soon as I got the letter, I kneeled down and I said a prayer. And I asked that I would be able to focus on my mission and not even worry about it. That I could focus all my heart and energy to being a missionary and to preaching the gospel. And it was amazing how immediately after that prayer, all sadness and frustration completely went away. And it was just I just felt happiness and light and joy, and I was able to focus on being a missionary. And it was didn't even faze me. It was awesome. And that's one pre-mission experience that kind of transitioned into being a missionary. Another experience I had before my mission, I had the great opportunity of going out with missionaries a lot in my area before I was a missionary. And we would teach lessons and they would take me with them. And it was super awesome because I got to kind of get my feet wet a little bit and just get a taste for what being a missionary is like. So that was really fun. My last area was in West Jordan, and it was a huge relief to go to a new area where I had a companion that was excited to work. West Jordan was a lot higher end, kind of like South Jordan, except we were in an area of the South Salt Lake mission that was very new. A lot of new houses, a lot of new developments just being built. We were living in a member's basement, and they were a really, really nice older couple. So in West Jordan, we also covered Copperton. And in that area, we had a lot of a bigger space. It was much more than just 2 square miles. I don't even know how big the geographic area was. We were covering 2 stakes, but we had a car. And that was my first time with a car. And I got to learn how to drive in the snow because I'd never driven in the snow before, being from Florida. Thank goodness for anti-lock brakes because they saved my life a few times. In West Jordan, very different from South Jordan geographically. We were up by the hillside, right up by the mountain on the west side of Salt Lake City South Mission. I was there for the longest out of all my areas. My first companion was really awesome. My second companion was a really big challenge for me. And I was with him also for the longest I'd been with any of my companions. He was a challenge to me because he was very socially awkward around people. And it made it really difficult for me because I'm very much a people pleaser. I love to make friends and have good relationships with people, and I feel like I'm pretty good at communication. And he was very awkward around people, members and non-members alike, and it made it difficult for me to teach with him because I had a hard time trusting his ability to teach. And when I was teaching people about the gospel, I expect that it's going to be very polished, very well put together. And here I am at the end of my mission. I have a lot of experience. I'm much more polished missionary to be with somebody who's not very good at teaching. It made it really, really difficult for me. I learned a lot of patience with that companion. I learned a lot about patience and also about missionary work and how it's not just the missionaries that is moving the work forward. Because with that companion, as much as he may have struggled and we struggled together, we baptized more than any other missionary companionship that I had in my whole mission. Not only because I was there for the longest, but we actually did a lot of missionary work there. And so even when your companion might be struggling or you're not communicating well and you're not working together well, you can still see miracles with the work moving forward if you're both working hard. And he was a hard-working missionary. He did work hard. And we got to see a lot of success in West Jordan. It was a good ending of our mission. I actually got the privilege of extending my mission. I know sometimes missionaries can extend, sometimes they can't. It's kind of one of those things that just depends on the mission president. But I asked if I could extend, so I got to stay an extra 4 weeks in West Jordan. On my last day of my mission, I think it was a Sunday, the very last day of my mission, I got to have a baptism. And it was with somebody that we'd been teaching the entire time I was in West Jordan. And I was there for like 6 months. We started teaching him, we stopped teaching him, we started teaching him again. And I told him, hey, I'm leaving on this day. It's my last day of my mission. I'd really love to be at your baptism. If you'd be interested, we have this date. Would you prepare yourself to be baptized on that day? And he finally committed to being baptized. And so to be able to have a baptism on my very last day as a missionary was really, really cool. And we got a lot of baptisms in that last month. So it was an awesome experience to be able to extend for an extra 4 weeks. I was on a bike in Taylorsville. Our area was really small. The Salt Lake Community College was right in our area, and so we'd go by that all the time, getting from one half of our area to the other. That was actually the area that bordered on the mission, where I saw the other missionaries on the other side of the street from the Salt Lake City mission. It was weird because in Taylorsville and any missions, as you get closer to the border of the mission, you have to deal a little bit more with what we call poaching, where some of the missionaries were teaching someone that lived in your area outside of your area. And so if you're teaching somebody but they don't live in your area, then you're not supposed to teach them or even baptize them for that matter. They're supposed to be taught and baptized by the missionaries in the area that they live. So it kind of got to be a little bit crazy sometimes, just because as investigators of the church, you fall in love with the missionaries that teach you. They bring there's a very special relationship that you generate with those missionaries. And so even though we lived in the mission in the area that they may have lived in, we're serving in the area that they lived in, sometimes they were being taught by other missionaries. And so they would come to our area to get baptized, even though they had been taught by the other missionaries. Anyway, it was just kind of a challenging thing that you'd experience being so close with other missionaries. In Taylorsville, there was a couple restaurants that were in our mission that was known for giving missionaries free food. And there was kind of a rule that you weren't supposed to abuse those. And so we were only allowed to go there once a week. But there was a really good Hawaiian restaurant that we'd go to. Every week we'd go there because it was really good. Taylorsville was a little bit more like Kearns, a little bit more lower income housing there. I remember there was a woman that we met that I saw her in the parking lot. I walked up and talked to her, and we taught her all the lessons, and she got baptized. And I think she was one of the very few or only baptisms I had from talking to a stranger on the street. And so that kind of built my testimony that you should talk to everyone. Really, really good experience. She was awesome. She was actually from Africa, and she was there with her little boy and her little girl, visiting from. Her home in Africa was in war, and so she came here to America to live, and she was very receptive to the gospel. That was a really cool experience because she didn't have any previous knowledge of the church, like most people that we taught. And so it was always a treasured memory for me. Taylorsville, like Kearns, there's a lot of higher concentration of Spanish-speaking people, and so that made we had a better relationship with the Spanish-speaking elders in those areas because we ran into Spanish speakers all the time. And so we were pretty fluent in being able to refer Spanish-speaking missionaries' phone numbers and give them a card with the Spanish-speaking elders' numbers, because we saw so many more Spanish-speaking people up there. He and I went to Taylorsville. Like, we stayed at companionship, and then we transferred together back to Taylorsville in a different part of Taylorsville to whitewash into this new area together. So that was kind of a crazy thing, because usually when you transfer, you leave your companion, and even when you whitewash, normally you whitewash with another missionary. So to stay with my trainee into this new area together was kind of crazy. In fact, when we went to Taylorsville together, we were right across the hall. We were in an apartment complex right across the hall from the Spanish-speaking elders. So it was kind of cool to be so close proximity to the other Spanish-speaking elders. That transfer while we were in Taylorsville was probably my worst transfer on my mission, my worst 6 weeks. What made it difficult was being so close to the other missionaries. The missionary I was training got to be really close with the Spanish-speaking elders, really close friends with them, and it made it difficult to be kind of a leader to him, because he started to want to do what they were doing more, and they weren't very obedient missionaries. So that made it really challenging for me, because I was very eager to get out and do missionary work. It's really tough being in a new area to whitewash in. It makes it even more challenging when your companion is struggling as a missionary. And so after a couple weeks, I ended up actually talking to my zone leaders and asking them to kind of help us out and help me out, because I was eager to go work. We didn't have any baptisms that whole 6 weeks. We didn't really even have any solid investigators the whole time we were there. So it was a really challenging time for me to do the missionary work when my companion was so unmotivated. Yeah, Kearns is pretty ghetto. It was definitely the most ghetto area that I served my mission. The people were really humble there. There was also a higher population of non-members or less active members in Kearns versus some of the more upper-class areas that I served, like South Jordan or Draper. We taught a lot of people in Kearns. Well, I think we taught Kearns when I was there. I think we hit the highest baptizing zone, because there was a Kearns zone in the mission against the other zones. So that was kind of cool, just to be able to have that experience. But the Kearns area, so when I was there, right in my area was the Olympic Oval from the 2002 Winter Olympics. So they had the big ice skating Olympic Oval there right in the middle of my area that we'd walk past every single day. They had a big outdoor pool I was there during the summer, and so there was always people out there swimming in the pool, a lot of apartment complexes and just neighborhoods. It wasn't bad compared to some of the places that I lived in Florida back home. So to me, it wasn't bad at all. I wasn't afraid being there, but I know that there were, some people might consider it dangerous or whatever. When I was in Kearns during our weekly planning session, me and my trainer, we would always order this huge pizza from Big Daddy's Pizza, and I don't think they're even around anymore, but it was this massive pizza, and we would eat as much as we could, and I would save the rest, and it would usually last me all week to the next weekly planning session. And so it was just a fun memory having that huge, I don't even remember how big, it was like 35 inches, this massive, huge pizza. But it was so good, and it was like double layered, like pepperoni and cheese, and then again pepperoni and cheese, and it was just huge. So that was kind of cool. So in Draper was my fourth area, and I second transfer trained a new missionary in Draper when I first got there. He'd been there for one transfer with his trainer. Draper's a lot higher end, kind of like South Jordan. A lot nicer houses there, a lot more members there. Where I was at, we were living in a barn in someone's backyard. That was where our apartment was. And really close to our house, there was a whole bunch of shopping centers and malls and a lot more commercial businesses. Fell in love with Zupa's when I was in Draper. Zupa's is an awesome restaurant. We get to eat free there once a week. When we were in Draper, we actually taught in a trailer park. Every Sunday, we would teach a Sunday school class in this trailer park, in the office at the trailer park. So that was kind of cool, getting to teach a Sunday school class to anybody in the trailer park that wanted to come. And it's kind of like a mini church meeting, That was kind of interesting, but really fun. My second transfer while I was in Draper, I actually got a new missionary. And this was my first time getting to train a new missionary, so I was really excited, and he was from California, and I was trying to teach him everything I could. He had a really interesting life before he became a missionary, and so it's good for me to be able to get to know another missionary who had a way different background than I did. When I was in South Jordan, it got really, really cold, and we didn't bike because it was snowy, and it was freezing cold. I don't know, probably almost 0-degree temperatures, snow blowing sideways. That was probably the most extreme. I got really good at riding my bike without hands. Repairing flat tires, got really good at that. Learned about slime. It's this stuff you can buy at Walmart. It's like this green gloop that you can pump into your tires, and it has little black chunks in it, because there's these sharp pokey seeds all over the ground, especially in Kearns, where it would pop the tires. Every day we'd get popped tires. And the slime acted like blood. It would like clog the hole, and then you could keep riding your bike without having to stop with a flat tire. It was brilliant. We didn't get a lot of crazy food on my mission. One time a member fed us Japanese food. That was pretty crazy, but that was about it. I never felt like any area of my mission was dangerous at all. It was kind of a cush mission, it was very like fluffy, like protected, It's not like some crazy missions. So when I was in Taylorsville, one time we stopped at a snow cone shack on the side of the road, and there was a girl in there serving the snow cones. And I was talking to her just briefly, and she said, "I serve the devil." And I remember it didn't fluster me at all. And I looked her right in the eyes and I said, "He's not going to win." And I remember feeling so full of the Spirit, like so powerful at that moment. And the look on her face was shock and speechless. She didn't have anything to say. But that was an experience that I never forgot. That was always really powerful to me. Planning is so important. I can't stress how important planning is and how much I learned from planning and setting goals. I think that's probably one of the highlights that I picked up out of the entire Preach My Gospel manual and from my mission in general, is goal setting, the importance of living your life in accordance to learning how to achieve those goals. Is the biggest life lesson I took away. My favorite spiritual experiences on my mission were when I was teaching strictly from the heart and from the Spirit, I guess you could say. When we weren't really following the structured lesson that you would get from Preach My Gospel, those were my favorite experiences, just really tailoring our lessons to the needs of the people we were teaching. There's several that come to mind. One in particular, occasionally we would have what we would call a pray now, where we'd actually have everybody in the room kneel down, and we would each in turn pray and ask for a witness to the things that we'd been teaching, if they were true or not. There was one young man where we did a pray now with him, and everybody took turns praying. It was a very powerful spirit while we were doing this, and he came away feeling strongly that it was true and he was to be baptized. Unfortunately, I left that area, and I never got to see him get baptized. It wasn't until a year later where I got a message from a missionary saying, "Did you teach so-and-so?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, he's getting baptized, and if you want to come to his baptism, he'd like to have you there." So I got to leave my area and go to his baptism. It wasn't that far away. And after the baptism, we were having kind of a little bit of a testimony meeting in the Relief Society room. And the girlfriend of this young man, she was bearing her testimony of the power of the gospel and how much it meant to her in her life. And in her testimony, she shared the experience of that pray now that we had had with him a year previous. And she said, that experience was so powerful to me, and I never forgot the spirit that I felt there. She didn't realize that I was that missionary sitting in the audience, the same one that had done the pray now. She had forgotten me, but she hadn't forgotten that experience. And so that was powerful to me that she remembered that, and it had an impact on her, even though she was already a member. That was a sweet moment for me. Being from Florida, I didn't really pack any huge, thick jackets, because I don't know if they even sell those there. So it wasn't actually until I came to Utah that I bought a really big jacket to keep warm for the winter. The winters were pretty brutal, and I had to have a lot of warm clothes for the winters, but the summers were nice. I remember one time, because in my mission, from April conference to October general conference, we were allowed to proselyte with just the white shirt. And then from October to April, during the winter months, we had to always have a suit on when we were proselyting all the time. And there was one time, it was just after April conference, and we were like so excited for it to be warm out that we were like, just went out with just the white shirts, and it happened to snow that day. So we were walking home in the snow with just our white shirts on, like icicles hanging down from our nose. We finally got home and we were so cold. So we probably weren't prepared very much for that day. Definitely important to bring the proper clothes for the weather. When I first got the call to go to Salt Lake City South, I wasn't that excited. I was actually quite disappointed because I wanted to go foreign. But I can say right now it was the best mission, and I honestly wouldn't change it for anything. I loved being able to go there as a missionary and teach the people of Salt Lake City. The lessons that I've learned, I'll carry with me throughout my life, of how important it is to stay active in the church and to always stay faithful to the covenants that you've made and the promises to our Heavenly Father. I came to know for myself as a missionary the power of the Spirit and the influence that it has on people who are open and receptive to the truth, that just sincerely want to know for themselves what is true. And the Spirit will testify as you are an instrument teaching the gospel and teaching what is true that you've come to know for yourself. I can't deny the lessons that I've learned and the testimony that I gained as a missionary. And I'll never forget how much my Heavenly Father loves me and how much He loves all of His children. And this is why He sends missionaries to all corners of the world, because He wants all of His children to know the truth and to be able to come back and live with Him again. And He loves each one of us so much because we're all His children. Serve with every ounce of energy that you can. Don't look back, and give it every bit that you have. Sprint to the end, and you'll be able to look back and know that you did your very best. And that brings me a lot of comfort to be able to know that I gave it my all, and for you to be able to know that you served with all your heart, might, mind, and strength is something that is priceless.
My first day on the mission, I actually did Tract, which in Salt Lake is less and less common. We did a little bit of tracting when I was first out. We did maybe 10 hours a week or so of tracting, just door to door. And I'd be surprised if they really do that much anymore, because we did, by the end of my mission, that really wasn't something we spent our time with. But I'm really glad we did, because the very first day, we tracted a street, contacted a man who was a member of the church, but not active. He was living at the time with his girlfriend. He had several children. He had actually been with this woman for many years. They were sort of common law married, not really married though. They had several children, most of them teenagers, and none of them baptized. And it's interesting, he was really warm and I could tell he was happy to see us there. His initial reason for wanting us in, he said, my daughter's not baptized. I want my daughter to be baptized. She's about 14. And so we agreed to come back. But quite frankly, through my whole mission, that turned out to be one of the sweetest experiences, because not only did we go and teach his daughter and she got baptized, but he quit smoking, he started going to church, he got married to his wife, they went to the temple. The entire family was blessed immensely, and that was just first day of tracting in Salt Lake. It was phenomenal. Before you serve a mission, at least for me, I had this idea that missionary work was about finding people who'd never heard of the church before and teaching them all the fundamentals and helping them to quit smoking and that kind of stuff. But in Salt Lake City, obviously, everyone's heard about the church. Not literally everyone. I actually ran into a few people that had honestly never heard of the church before. But majority of the people know what the church is. So that might raise the question to you, well, how do you do missionary work then? Because it's not about, knocking on the door and finding someone who's never heard of it. Well, a great deal of the success that we found on our mission was through teaching families who had someone in the family who was a member already. It's a very common thing to find families who maybe the husband grew up a member of the church, went all his life, but maybe in college or something, he just, stopped going to church. Met his wife, got married, had kids, and now here they are in Salt Lake City, not going to church. These kinds of families are often an excellent place to start. Usually what you'll find is that even members who aren't going to church often feel very strongly about their children having a relationship with God, or their children being baptized. Now, a word of caution, you can't just go baptize children because that's not going to help. You need to focus on the entire family when you're teaching. And this will happen. Sometimes people will literally want you to come in, teach their children, and leave them alone. Baptize the child and then never come back to church. That's actually what people would do if you'd be willing. So you need to be really careful about focusing on the entire family and bringing the entire family to Christ. And take those good desires that the currently inactive member has and having that bless their entire family. A lot of the happiest conversion experiences, as I talked about before, was families who already had a foot in the door of the church. There's just a lot of success there. So don't necessarily be looking for people who have never heard of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Spend your time working with members who aren't active, and you'll see a lot of success through that. I guess this comes back to what we had talked about earlier with obedience. When I first started serving my mission, I knew, immediately that it was a high baptizing area. My first baptism was the second day of my mission. Obviously, that wasn't the first day we'd met the person. They'd been being taught for a while, but we baptized a lot of people, and that's because of the members. Any missionary in Salt Lake who thinks that they can succeed without the members, just completely wrong. You cannot succeed without the members. They are the key to your success. And the better you are at working with active members of the church, the more success you're going to have as a missionary in Salt Lake City. That's probably true elsewhere as well, but just especially so because there are so many members. They are the source of your work. You have no need to tract or to street contact or any of that stuff. If you have a good relationship with your ward mission leaders, with your bishops, with your stake presidents, in your stakes. And just to be clear, I assume this hasn't changed much. It may have changed in terms of the actual number. But the average, not the geographical area, but the unit area, the number of units that you cover as a missionary in Salt Lake, was anywhere between 2 and 3 stakes. In fact, I think some even had 4 stakes. So you would cover several stakes, meaning you had however many stake presidents, and then however many bishops per stake. Usually it was something like 8 to 12 wards. So if you have 3 stakes with 8 to 12 wards, we're talking a lot of bishops, a lot of ward mission leaders, a lot of elders quorum presidents, a lot of Relief Society presidents that you need to coordinate well with. It takes a huge amount of organizational skills to be able to juggle all that. because you just can't drop the ball on these people. They're counting on you to be on top of things. So that's something to really understand, is being able to organizationally and also on a personal level work well with members. And that's really what's going to bring your success. When I first went to Salt Lake, I really wasn't expecting to see diversity. Utah isn't necessarily known for diversity in particular, but I was really shocked to find a huge amount of diversity. I taught people from China, people from Tonga and Samoa, people from Africa, people from Thailand, and with all of these people, I was usually eating some of their cultural food. So I actually ate a lot of really diverse foods. It was actually really funny. I was eating with a Samoan family once, and this was actually my first time being hosted by a Polynesian family. And something I didn't know at the time was Polynesians, when they have guests over, especially honored guests, and Polynesians feel very strongly about the honor of missionaries. They don't eat with their guests. They eat after their guests. So they have their guests over, and their guests eat the whole meal, and they're done. And when the guests leave, that's when the family eats. So I had no idea. So we were there eating, the only two in the house eating. There were kids there, the mom was there, And we're like, aren't you guys hungry? And they're like, oh no, we're not hungry. But it just turns out that that's just how they do things. But in that dinner, I was having some kind of dish with some meat in it. And I wasn't sure what kind of meat it was. I couldn't tell because everything, the spices and everything was new to me. So like, what kind of meat is this? And the lady who cooked the meal said, oh, it's horse. And she started laughing. And I'm like, I think you're kidding, but I'm not really sure. So for all I know, I've eaten horse. It is a traditional thing to eat in Samoa, but I'd be surprised if they could get it in Utah. So anyway, there's a huge amount of cultural diversity in terms of food and in terms of the people that I met with. You are in a fishbowl in Salt Lake City. By that I mean everyone knows who the missionaries are, even the non-members. Everyone knows what the church is in Salt Lake, and everyone knows who the missionaries are. And everything you do every day is being watched and scrutinized. On the funny side of things, you would sometimes hear missionaries say, every member a mission president. Because everyone, especially people who had served a mission, felt like they knew what missionaries should be doing. And sometimes they were wrong, and sometimes they were right. But everything you do is being watched by the members. And they expect the highest level of obedience from you. So don't be surprised if people call you out on doing things that are perfectly legitimate because they feel like, in their mission it wasn't or something. At the same time, you better keep your ducks in a row, because if you're stepping out of line, people are going to see it, and it's going to reflect on your work, because people don't respect missionaries who can't keep the rules. I think it's really important to understand culturally that Salt Lake is religiously rather polarized. And that doesn't mean that success is difficult in Salt Lake City. It's actually, you're going to find a lot of missionary success in Salt Lake. But do know that you're going to be mixing with people who actually have some very negative feelings about the church. Sometimes it's former members who have been disenfranchised for whatever personal reasons. And sometimes it's people who aren't members who just don't like talking about religion, and they feel uncomfortable being approached about religion. And so in an LDS culture, that has been difficult for them, and so over time they tend to get a little cranky about it. So it's really important to understand and be sensitive to the fact that when you knock on someone's door, if you are cold calling, they know who you are. You don't need to explain to them that you're a missionary from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They know that, and they've had 50 other missionaries before. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't talk to them and that you shouldn't try to help them. But it does mean that you shouldn't. It does mean that you can't just expect that you know all these things and they don't know all these things, because quite frankly they've probably had the missionary lessons before, or they at least know a large portion of what LDS doctrine is all about. So you really got to care about people for people, and not just treat people like, oh, this is a new contact. Oh, I got a new investigator. People aren't investigators. People aren't contacts. They're people with dreams and hopes and feelings. And the negative experiences I have had with people in Salt Lake have been because people in the past have treated them as potential converts and not as people. Salt Lake City, I mean, just by its nature, is really deeply rooted in its pioneer history. Salt Lake City has, I think it's Utah-wide actually, it's called Pioneer Day. It's on, I think, July 24th. Yeah, it's on July 24th, and for Salt Lake, it's on par with 4th of July in terms of how important it is culturally. They have a huge parade, and so the fact that the city was settled by pioneers, and people even to this day are very aware and conscious and proud of their pioneer history. For me, it was about 50-50. I was either walking or riding a bike, or I was in a car. It really just depended on the area. Some areas are geographically really small. In fact, my first area that I served in was 2 square miles. That was the entire area. So we didn't need a car. We could have walked from one area to the other in at a slow pace at an hour and a half. So yeah, really no need for a car in some areas. Other areas are a little larger geographically, so a car's a little more necessary. Especially if you're serving in a leadership capacity as a district leader or a zone leader, where you need to be visiting other areas, then a car is a little more useful. The big attraction with the locals and with tourists and things is usually something in the mountains. Mountains are gorgeous. And don't let it fool you, those of you who aren't used to mountains, because I wasn't. I grew up in Pennsylvania where the biggest mountains were the Appalachians, and those really aren't that big. When you just look out onto the mountains, they're pretty, but it really doesn't, at least to me, it didn't really look like much. It was like, so I'm going to go up into that rocky cliff, and what am I going to do up there? I didn't realize that when you go up into these valleys, that there's just these lush, gorgeous valleys. Just some really beautiful stuff. Now, it really depends on, from a missionary perspective, what your mission rules are. It changed in my mission. Early on my mission, you could get permission to drive up into the valleys, the Big Cottonwood Creek Canyon. I should say canyons. They're the canyons. I don't know what the mission rules are currently, because they kind of tightened down on that later in my mission, to where you really wouldn't be going up into the canyon unless it was your area for a missionary purpose. So it really just depends on your mission president, what's going on at the time. Fry sauce. For those of you who don't live here, fry sauce is, at least to me, it was really weird. All it really is, I think, is just mayonnaise and ketchup mixed up, and maybe something else, I don't know. I really actually don't like it. I tried it once or twice, and I just thought it was weird that I was eating mayonnaise with my French fries. But that's kind of a cultural thing here. You get that in all the fast food restaurants. I was a brand new missionary. I think I'd been out for 3 or 4 weeks or so. And my companion, he's a funny guy. He's a real joker. He's just a really, really funny guy. He's always laughing and always joking. At the same time, he was a really smart guy, and he knew what he was doing in terms of being a missionary. And I don't mean that intellectually, I also mean that spiritually. He really knew his stuff. And I remember walking down the street once, and again, this is the area that was 2 square miles, and this is when we were tracting for 10 hours a week. Meaning, he had been there, I think, 2 transfers, or maybe 3 before that. So he had knocked on every door in the area at least 3 times, bare minimum. So he knew the area really well. It wasn't that hard because it was a tiny area. So we were walking down the street once, I think we were going to contact an investigator of ours. And he stopped and looked over at a house. And he said, I don't think I've knocked that door before. And just, we went up to the door. He didn't seem particularly interested or anything. He just seemed curious because he felt like he'd never knocked there before. So we knocked on the door. It turned out they were active members, but when they answered they said, "Elders, we're so glad you're here." It turns out someone was in fairly desperate need of a blessing. And so we were there and we administered a blessing to them. And that was a real testimony to me, because I believed in miracles and I believed in revelation and the guidance of the Spirit. But when you see things that obvious, it's a special experience. Let's see, this was about a year into my mission. I was training a new missionary, and we had this very interesting investigator. She was actually fully active. Her husband was a member. She went to church every Sunday, had been for years and years, but had never been baptized. The reasons she gave were that she didn't want to give up coffee. That was the reason she gave. We kind of felt like that probably wasn't really the root issue. But, we just wanted to work with things as we had them. So she had missionary lessons dozens of times. She loved the missionaries. She loved having them over, but she had this thing that was really just holding her back. So in terms of the coffee thing, it was kind of funny. I wouldn't do this normally. This isn't my normal mode of operation as a missionary. I wouldn't recommend this to all missionaries in the world. But in this particular circumstance, the Spirit guided me to feel like all we needed to do was to take her coffee pot. And so, we were having a lesson with her talking about these issues, and we said, you know what? We're going to take your coffee pot, and you're not going to drink coffee anymore. We're just taking it. And so we did. We walked to the kitchen, didn't ask her. We walked in the kitchen, took her coffee pot, unplugged it, and took it with us. And we ended up throwing it up in the dumpster at our apartment. But she was really, in fact, you could tell even in the moment, she was really surprised and she laughed. And she even took a picture of us, like posing with her and us, holding the coffee pot, about to take it away. Because really deep down, she didn't want the coffee. There were other issues that were involved. And coffee was just sort of this external manifestation of some of the concerns and anxieties she had. This same investigator, after we sort of overcame that coffee issue, we felt really strongly prompted to, and again, this isn't something that I would just do all the time. So this is a little bit of an unusual case, I suppose. But we sat down with her once and we felt very, having planned our lesson ahead of time, we felt very inspired. We weren't sure why we felt so strongly inspired, but we felt inspired to invite her to be baptized. I think it was a week from that day. Because again, she's already an active non-member. She's already going to church. There wasn't a whole lot of commitments for her to keep. She just quit coffee. So we said, we invite you to be baptized in a week. And she said, nope. And we said, you're going to get baptized in a week. We're not forcing you. It's just, we just know it's going to happen. And she's like, well, you got another thing coming, because that's not going to happen. And we said, okay, we'll see. And we asked, can we come and visit you every day for the next 7 days? She said, yeah, you can visit. I'm not getting baptized, but you can visit. Okay. So we visited the next day, and she got sick. And she didn't really want to see us. And again, I want to emphasize this a lot, because it would be an awful mistake for every missionary to just think this is how you can treat everybody all the time. But we just felt really, really driven to go there again and again. And even when she wouldn't see us, we'd talk to her husband and say, send this message to her for us. So the day before the baptism came, and she still was not having it, absolutely not getting baptized. And at this point, I remember this was a Sunday. After sacrament meeting, we found an empty room and got on our knees. And we'd been fasting about this. We were currently fasting. We got on our knees and we said, "Are we crazy, Heavenly Father? Like, we don't. The proposed baptism date is tomorrow, and she's still like not even close to being interested. Like, are we nuts? Like, tell us what's wrong here. Like, we don't understand what's happening." And again, we just felt peace and assurance that we were doing the right thing. As weird as that seemed to us. So, we said, okay, well, we'll go by today. So we went by, again, fasting and praying very, very intensely. And she wouldn't see us. And so we said, we'll come back later this afternoon. And if you're feeling better, then come. Then come and we'll talk. We felt prompted at that time, and again, this is relaying through her husband. We felt prompted at the time to offer her a blessing. And to assure her that this blessing would be an answer to her prayers. So we did. And we came back, and she still wasn't, her husband was still like, she's still in her room, and she's probably not going to be coming out. So we just sat down with him and talked for a while. And turns out she came downstairs. She said, "I want that blessing." So we gave her the blessing, and it just changed everything. I think the details of the blessing would probably be a little private and a little sacred to be sharing it, in this broadly. But that blessing changed everything for her. And not just in terms of her spiritual life, that changed everything. And she got baptized that night. Because she had been wanting it for so long. But some things had just held her back, and those things weren't there anymore. And there was no reason to wait. So we baptized her that night. That was a really special experience for us. I know that it is only through Christ that we can receive the ultimate happiness that we want in living with our Father in heaven again. That's a very general statement, because there's so much more to the day in and day out of life. But I know that the ultimate goal for all of us can only be realized through Christ. And that in these days, the days that we live in today, the only way that we can strengthen our relationship with Christ is through having faith in Him, repenting of our sins, being baptized through proper authority that's been restored to this church through the prophet Joseph Smith, and receiving the gift of the Holy Ghost. That is the way, and there just is no other way. I testify that that is the source of my happiness. And there's a lot of other things that make me happy in life. I'm married and we have a 5-month-old at home. And there's a huge amount of happiness. But I have those things, and I have the happiness through my family because of my relationship with God. And I trust that it is my relationship with God that will get me through the very difficult times in my life, and they already have. I testify that that is the way to happiness. And I don't mean piousness, and I don't mean holiness, and it does lead to those things too. But if you want to be happy, you need to follow Christ. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. I actually straddled 2 mission presidents, like almost exactly a year apart. So halfway through my mission, we got a new mission president. So I have 2 mission presidents that I love. The first mission president was President Risen May. He was, or I assume still is, an accountant in his normal job, and very disciplined approach to leading the mission. And that really, really blessed our mission in a big way. I remember for me, I really didn't go into the mission, I wanted to be an obedient missionary. I wanted to be, the best missionary I could when I went out. And I feel like I was overall a very obedient missionary, but there was one particular issue I remember. It was simply a mission policy. It was something we did as a matter of policy. It really wasn't, something church-wide or an obedience issue in terms of, general mission rules. But it was something specific to our area that the mission president was asking us to do. And quite frankly, I disagreed with that approach to things. And that was a tough thing for me, because I felt like not only was the policy not helpful, I felt like in some cases it was hurtful. Again, this is just my personal opinion about this policy. So I remember sitting down in an interview with the mission president and expressing this to him and saying, I gotta be honest, I don't agree with this at all. And he accepted that. He said, that's fine. You're allowed to disagree with that. But will you be obedient? That's the real question. Whether you agree or not, are you willing to be obedient? And that just hit me really hard, because that was probably the first time I've ever felt a personal disagreement with a priesthood leader. And when it gets down to it, you're just better off being obedient. You just are. No matter how smart you think you are, you're just better off being obedient. There's a lot of Polynesians in Salt Lake City. People from Samoa and Tonga mostly. These are some of the most faithful people you will ever meet. And they love missionaries more than you can possibly imagine. It's just a little word of advice in your relationship with these people. They will want to give you everything. And you need to respect them and their desires to give. There was one time I remember, and this was pretty representative of what happened often. Walking down the street, minding our own business, this huge SUV pulls over, and this guy pulls out a $50 bill and says, "Here, elders." And we're like, no, we don't need $50. We're okay. And he looked at us really concerned, and he said, "Would you deny me the blessings of serving a missionary?" He felt very strongly about it, and we just, honestly, we took it, because, I don't know, I couldn't say no to that. Because his faith in his desire to bless the servants of the Lord was very strong. So, on one hand, do not offend. If someone's offering you a gift in the hope of blessing a servant of God, take it and be gracious. At the same time, do not take advantage of the generosity of the members of the church. They will be very generous with you. For any of you going to Salt Lake City, whether that be more like in the Ogden area or even in the Provo mission, but basically anyone that goes to Utah, you need to understand that these missions in Utah are the best kept secret of the church. And they're going to stay that way. Here's what I mean by that. When you go on your mission, before you go on your mission, you're going to get people saying, "Utah? Really? What are you going to do there?" And when you get home from your mission, you're going to get people that say, "Utah? Really? What did you do there?" Don't expect people to understand what this mission is all about. And don't necessarily expect to know yourself right now what serving in this area is all about. But it is a choice place to be. Serving in Salt Lake City is the best place that I could have ever hoped to have served a mission. I was able to affect more souls in coming to Christ than I feel like I could have anywhere else. And if you've got a mission call to Utah, then that's the case for you too. It is the best place for you to be. And I cannot emphasize enough how choice the blessings are in serving there, and the great, great good that you can do in Salt Lake City.